This app has really helped me be more consistent because it makes a good portion of the production very automated, and so that I can make sure that reduces my investment time in terms of getting it all ready and preparing.
Before vidyo.ai, were you using any other content repurposing platforms or any other video editing platforms? What was your experience with them and what made you switch to vidyo.ai?
Yeah, I'd experimented with a couple of different platforms. What impressed me most about vidyo.ai was the ability for it did end to end. I was able to do everything within the one. And additionally, the rapid re-editing and things like Cut Magic, where it's actually doing a really good job of reformatting. Those were the things that kind of stood out and made this tool a little bit better than everything else.
So, Dave, tell me, as a podcaster, how do you handle the challenge of condensing longer podcasts into shorter, shareable videos without losing the essence of the content?
When I produce my show, I write and script the entire thing and I record it to teleprompter. But of course, that's still, I want to do several stories and I've got that in a particular format to shoot between 8 and 10 minutes. And so in order to promote that, make sure that I've gotten further bits out, you have to think a little bit about what are the highlights. And what I like about using vidyo.ai is that it actually gives me a bunch of options really quickly. And generally I find that the algorithm's pretty good at highlighting certain highlights. And because it gives me a selection, I can then use my analysis and say, okay, yeah, these are the 3 or 4 that I actually want to use of the, say, 10 or 11 that it'll give me.
Can you tell me about your experience with vidyo.ai so far? How has it influenced your content repurposing journey specifically?
Well, one of the things that the vidyo.ai has been able to let me do is do more. So when I was putting together myself, I put the podcast together by hand. I do the full editing for that, but then going back and doing the chopping, like in a way that's just reuse of the same thing. And what I find that the automation is really great at is doing all of that work. So it can do, it correctly aligns the video and so that I'm centered correctly. It identifies good highlights. And it's really good at doing the reformatting so that I can say, I'm doing something in a traditional 16:9, but then it'll do 1:1 and it'll do the 9:16s. And it does all of the reformatting just really rapidly. And it does that rather than I have to go through and redo each one by hand. Just quickly, it's going to put that all together for me. So I find that what it's able to let me do is produce more in the same amount of time.
How much time, if you can quantify it for me, how much time are you actually saving by using vidyo.ai to do the reformatting for you?
So it's funny because I don't think about using vidyo.ai from a savings perspective. I actually look at it from an expansion perspective. So for me, what I was doing by hand was putting together certain ones to promote as YouTube shorts. Like I would do that and it would take a lot of time. But what I can do now is instead of having to do that work by hand, I can take that time and not only do a little bit more, but also have it quickly reformatted for Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn and the YouTube shorts. And it's helping me with the description writing and making each one differently. So I'm taking the same amount of time and now I'm on 4 platforms. For me, the primary focus is YouTube Shorts and LinkedIn, but that allows me to continue to experiment on TikTok and Instagram with no additional cost or time.
Can you quantify for me once again the numbers that you have witnessed or the growth spurt that you have witnessed on these platforms that you have started to put your content out there using vidyo.ai?
It's a little tough to quantify exactly because it's part of a larger strategy. But at the same time, what I've seen is significant boost in impressions and engagement on both LinkedIn and YouTube, particularly by being able to deploy that much content over a consistent period of time. It's taken that growth arc and made it steeper. The comment that I always get from listeners is you seem to be everywhere, which for me is actually more important of the piece of feedback, is making sure that my content is in all the places that listeners would want to consume it without me having to do all of the work of making sure that it is completely redone by hand for each of those locations.
So you're on the Pro plan. Could you share any features from that plan that have significantly sort of improved your videos?
For me, it's about end-to-end workflow. So I can take the video, I can throw it, I can upload it in, and then, within 10 minutes or so, I have all of my pieces all cut up and ready to review. I can do everything within the platform so that I can then review them all. I can now then put them forth for scheduling and schedule them out on each of my platforms. And so I don't have to do any work other than within the platform. And that for me is the real key, is that I can do sort of now end to end entirely working within the platform without having to download and do something on going to the sites themselves or use another tool for scheduling.
What strategies do you typically employ to engage your audience through your videos? And do you find those strategies built inside vidyo.ai?
So for engagement, I actually work on the platforms themselves. I make sure they interact with all my listeners. I make sure to respond to comments. I'm making sure to work on the platforms themselves. What I find that vidyo.ai is letting me do is making sure that it's scheduled and then in the right places at the right time. And so I can then know at these times is when the videos are going to go up, and then I can be ready to do the engagement that's required.
And how do you approach subtitling in your video content, and what role do you think it plays in your social media strategy?
Well, everything is subtitled, and I let the application do it. I, of course, review everything because I think AI needs to be double checked, and I make sure that it's getting particularly acronyms or company names, make sure that we get those right, and those are important to people, particularly their company names. But what it's doing is it's saving me a bulk of work so that I don't have to actually transcribe those myself. It's doing it itself. I double check the work to make sure that it's right, and it's saving me a ton of time by doing that.
How do you maintain consistency in your video style? You're saying you're posting across 4 different platforms. So how do you ensure that your branding is in tune across all those 4 channels?
I take advantage of all the branding features within the product. So I've built templates that fit my style, my corporate colors, so that everything looks the same. I make sure that all my logos are available there. And I've got intros and outros that I use for videos that are again in the brand kit, so that I can just quickly say, here's the clip, put this outro on it, and make sure that it's in this template. And then I know that it's all in the correct colors. It's exactly the way I want it to look. And I can use the time just to double check scripts and make sure that the cuts are the way I want it to look and send it out. The big thing that vidyo.ai has let me do is experiment a little bit more on platforms that I'm not as comfortable with. So I don't mind saying I have a little bit more gray hair. I'm not as necessarily comfortable with something like TikTok. But by having a tool like this that lets me do it, and do things a little bit more rapidly, it makes me more comfortable with experimentation to see what resonates. I'm able to keep my own distinct voice and style, yet see if I can make that work in a different platform. So I think for me, that's been sort of the number one difference, is the ability to do a little bit more experimentation.